Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. I'll be hosting today's show. Up first on the hazardous weather graphic, there is no hazardous weather on any of the graphics anywhere in the state here for tonight or into tomorrow. So no watches, no warnings, no errors here all across the state. And moving on to satellite imagery, we've got a big ridge of high pressure out here over the Bering Sea. Just keeping the storminess out to the west, coming up over the top, and you can see this front starting to come eastward there in the westerly flow over the top of the ridge center. That's just a little bit to the south there, but you can see pretty good conditions all across much of the Bering Sea. Still have the cold outflow out of the interior here, picking up moisture as it comes off the coast. Actually, this right in through here, that gray area is not low clouds. That's the sea ice edge there, right through there. And then this area, this zone down here, that's the cloudiness, and that's still producing a little bit of light snow here along the Alaska Peninsula back toward the eastern Aleutians, all in a diminishing mode throughout the day. Along with the winds, winds gradually coming down, and Kodiak Island, not too bad, variably cloudy, has some clouds coming in from the northeast there. May have been a stray snow shower or two, but nothing heavy or very extensive. I didn't see anything at the state airport, at least up until the last time I looked. And nice conditions here, south central Alaska, clear and cold over the interior, mostly clear and cold over the interior. And then clearing out here over the southeast coast, not too bad. A few scattered clouds, isolated snow showers here offshore. Same thing along the North Gulf Coast, farther south than they were yesterday. On the chart today, you can see scattered isolated snow shower activity in the Gulf of Alaska, and that's about it. And then a little bit of a break here along Kodiak, southern Cook Inlet, maybe just as I mentioned, a couple of flurries, and that's about it. And then it picks up a little bit out here along the Alaska Peninsula, but this all diminishing throughout the day. In fact, probably looking worse the way I have it drawn here than what it actually was. Just very light amounts there. Winds coming down, still have this 1,040 millibar high over St. Lawrence Island. So we've got pretty light winds here from the Pribilofs on up into the Bering Strait. And still pretty gusty out of the northeast here over the southwest interior, into Bristol Bay, back down across the Alaska Peninsula, but much lighter than they were yesterday, especially for the eastern Aleutians. Up to the north, another strong center of high pressure just off the Arctic coast there, 1,045 millibars, and that sliding eastward a little bit there, opening the door here for this band of clouds, the first band of mostly high stuff right through here, main moisture back to the west farther, and with that warm front. But again, it's kind of squirming and wiggling its way over the top of the upper level high, and that'll begin to spread some light snow into the western Arctic coast later tonight. Otherwise, out to the west here, this front actually starting to retreat back to the west from its position yesterday. Everything moving south to north, this coming up over the top. Actually, this is another front that's developed and come northward with a low center off the chart there. But rain continued to fall here over the western Aleutians. Gale force winds, Shimmy is still reporting winds out of the southeast, 40 to 50 miles per hour in gusts, 55 miles per hour in some cases. And that'll slowly improve tonight here, but fair conditions over the Bering Sea, light winds, central Aleutians, Adak and Atka, with some clearing all the way up to the Pribilofs. And looking at tonight's forecast, the system was down here to the south, makes a pretty good jog up to the northeast, east-northeast there. So that'll spread the wind and rain into the Queen Charlotte Islands. Gradually, the gradient getting a little tighter here across the northern panhandle and the North Gulf Coast. So be a general increase in the wind, especially the outflow winds through the Copper River Delta, channel areas of Prince William Sound, in across northern Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay. Those areas will see an increase in the winds, but not so here over the interior. Light winds and cold temperatures well below zero for the lows. Could see some low clouds and fog form up over the portions of the upper Yukon Valley, but right now it doesn't look like it'd be anything too extensive, but it could result in some IFR in those areas. And now this front comes sailing down from the west-northwest here, brings in an increase in the wind and snow into the western Arctic coast, possibly getting down to maybe as far south as Kivalina, and I think it'll stay north of Kotzebue at least through tonight, with the strong high here holding right over St. Lawrence Island, eastward through the interior. So that's going to send this mostly just off to the east with not much of any southward progression. And we still have this strong southerly flow occurring out here to the west. So, of course, precipitation in the form of rain out there all the way up into the Russian Far East, with the strongest winds from about Chimyanat back toward the Komodorskis. And again, the rain tapering off here for the far western Aleutians, becoming more showery, and no change for the Adak-Atka area, variable clouds on up to the Pribilofs, even more clearing and less of a breeze than what they'll see in Atka. And the snow showers here are still tapering off, but still lingering as well there with variable clouds, that the winds continue to lighten and become a little more easterly or east-northeasterly, and that northeast offshore flow continues along the southwest coast there, so it's going to stay cold and VFR in those areas. Kodiak Island, still a risk of a light snow shower through tonight with this moisture actually warming conditions, so that's producing the snow showers, or the areas of light snow, and any one of those surges could move on to the east side of the island there and produce some light snow for at least a short period of time overnight tonight, but the southeast coast dry and mostly clear. Forecast for tomorrow, this front sliding eastward here with the snow, areas of blowing snow up there from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast, and some of that might slip on down into the Chukchi Sea there. Staying north of the Bering Strait, though, very weak boundary through here, so really not as impressive as it looks here the way it's drawn. But chances of light snow in through this area, and again, the stronger winds with the system will be shifting eastward to the central and then on off to the eastern Arctic coast tomorrow. Strong ridge of high pressure here, 1,041 millibar center over the upper Yukon Valley, and 1,040 near St. Lawrence Island, still holding strong, and very tight gradient now, especially right through here from the east side of the Panhandle up across Lynn Canal and along the North Gulf Coast to about Prince William Sound. So pretty, as I mentioned, increasing the outflow winds there. And probably see at least mostly cloudy, occasional light snow Kodiak Island, increasing northeast winds. And this system bringing some good shot of wind and rain into the southern Panhandle tomorrow, taking its time moving northward. Even the central areas, you'll see a chance of precipitation late in the afternoon. And then for the Monday outlook, high pressure kind of redeveloping back to the west here. So that's really going to keep the storm in us even farther, mostly over Kamchatka and into the Sea of Okhotsk. Aleutians dry with easterly winds, not all that strong. Excuse me, variable clouds back to the Pribilofs, a little bit more of a northerly breeze there, but still dry. Isolated flurries, low clouds, possible fog here over the northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island, the Bering Strait, and then a lot of leftover moisture here up along the from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast. There are areas light snow, cloudy skies, could be some areas of marginal to IFR conditions with that, and then maybe some of this moisture kind of edging its way westward, and that's about it. No big changes occurring over the interior at all. Still a tight gradient right along the coast into the northern Panhandle. This front edging northward, so it looks like north of the front, light snow, mixture, wintry mix there along and just south of the front to just plain rain down towards especially Prince of Wales Island and Dixon Entrance. For the lows Sunday morning, anywhere from 15 to 30 below here over the interior areas with the minus 15s mostly along the Arctic coast, and well below zero in the 20s to lower 30s here over the interior, right down into the Copper River Basin, and teens to mid 20s. So the Panhandle, and you can see the 0-degree isotherm still off the coast here into the Bering Sea, but lower 20s to the Pribilofs, milder for the Aleutians. Highs tomorrow, staying below zero, central eastern interior, but you can see rising above freezing, that system coming in, surge of warm air in those southwesterly, so rising into the teens there for the Arctic coast, upper 20s for the Bering Sea, lower 20s or teens to lower 20s for south central Alaska, and 20s to lower 30s for the Panhandle. Lows for Monday morning, well below zero over the eastern interior, and low below zero for the Arctic coast there, right around 30 for the Aleutians, and then the highs on Monday, still cold in the east, milder out over the Aleutians.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First significant weather graphic showing lots of VFR across interior Alaska and also over the northern Bering Sea, right on down into the Adak area. IFR slipping eastward there to about Chimyanat with some marginal stuff as far as Kiska Island. Atka to about Nikolsky, marginal VFR up to, but not including the Pribilof Islands, and still some lingering IFR on the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula there, southern Bristol Bay. Just a patch up there over the Yukon Flats area of some low clouds and fog that could form. And then a system coming down from the northwest, spreading lower conditions, possibly IFR there into the Barrow area. by tomorrow morning. And then in the afternoon, that whole area expands as that system drops over the top of the ridge over the Bering Sea, right in across the north slope, pushing eastward down to the Brooks Range, and then some of that sliding on down in toward the Bering Strait. Good VFR here south of the Brooks Range through the interior. Northern Bering Sea looking really good, exceptionally good. And then some patchy areas of marginal VFR possible, just a slight risk here along the Alaska Range. IFR sliding northward into the southern southeast coast of that next formidable system coming up, along with increased winds and turbulence. Otherwise, marginal VFR mostly across the Aleutians. And for Monday morning, not much change here, a little more extensive area of marginal VFR, but no IFR in the forecast. That's south of the Pribilofs there, northern areas into the southwest coast, nothing but VFR, and North Gulf Coast, same forecast, maybe some patchy marginal stuff, far eastern Alaska Range, North Waitok and those areas, and then quite a zone of IFR now for the Arctic coast and North Slope, right on down to the Brooks Range, and the southeast coast mostly marginal. And for the afternoon, Monday, kind of breaks out a little bit there, but a patch IFR up over the northern southeast coast in that area, but VFR over toward the border. VFR starting to diminish here over interior Alaska, but holding on to the southern southeast areas. And this stuff kind of dissipating up there over the north slope slowly. Patchy IFR, Koyukuk Valley, same thing back here over the southwest. Not all that bad. Marginal VFR now over the far northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island. And marginal VFR along the Aleutians there, back out towards Shimia. Anaktuvuk looks like another good VFR day tomorrow, as does Adigan. And all of the Alaska Range looking good. Lake Clark, Merrill, VFR, rainy. Sea lanes visibility is unlimited for both rainy and windy. And for Isabel, mostly VFR. It will be VFR for both windy and Mentasta tomorrow. Tanita, VFR also. And Portage, VFR. Chilkoot and White, VFR. Looking at freezing levels here at the surface, right around that's Atka. Just south of the Fox Islands, right up along the east side of Kodiak, hugging the North Gulf Coast, and about the same pattern here down across the Panhandle, mostly along the coast, cutting across Prince of Wales Island, but quite a gradient here. This whole area shifting northward tomorrow morning, 2,000 feet there right over the southern Queen Charlottes. That'll be lifting northward throughout the day as that system comes northward, and persistent strong southerly flow out here on the western side of that huge ridge, pulling 8,000 foot freezing levels up over the western Aleutians with 2 to 4 to 6,000 feet right up to the Russian coast. And taking a look at icing, not really any icing out there. Band back out of our area, actually, just west of Shimei and Attu. Otherwise, we got this area slipping southeastward. Tomorrow will be sliding from northwest to southeast or east-southeast there across the north slope in the Arctic coast. So look for some icing up there with that system. The heavier stuff for sure here lifting northward into the southern southeast coast from Dixon Entrance. Could see quite an area of considerable moderate rime icing above about 5,000 feet here, edging its way northward with some icing threats reaching the central panhandle by late in the afternoon. And for the jet stream, there's that tremendous ridge of high pressure out here over the Bering Sea with flow coming around that, blocking these westerlies. South to north, 90 to 100 knots up and over the top, and still the cold northerly flow here over the western interior, 70 to 80 knots. Huge trough here out over the Gulf of Alaska, actually the northeast Pacific with a jet well to the south, but coming up, southerlies, that's going to push that front up into the southern southeast coast. 9,000 feet, northeast 15 up to 30, 35 knots, Kodiak Island, quite breezy over the southwest interior, southwest up to 75 over the western Aleutians, and strong winds reaching the southern southeast coast. Tomorrow afternoon at 3,000 feet here, 60 knotters up into the southern Gulf of Alaska, 30 for Kodiak, light eastern interior, and northeast 30 to 35 here across the southwest, and then those strong winds out to the west there as that next front approaches. So turbulence, quite an area of moderate chop for the western Aleutians and the southwest interior and the Panhandle.
Now, given what we know about how noise is generated by airplanes and how it's perceived by people on the ground, we can make one simple observation. If we're flying an airplane with a constant speed prop, reducing RPM is the single most effective thing we can do to reduce noise. And if we're flying a fixed pitch prop, greater altitude and lateral separation is our most effective tactic. With that understanding, let's look at strategies for reducing noise in the airport environment. And let's begin with the takeoff. Some airports seem to attract residential development, the way mobile homes attract tornadoes. It's important to select a run-up location as far from houses as possible. For the same reason, if you have a choice, use a runway located as far from noise-sensitive neighborhoods as possible. Even if it weren't a good idea, for safety reasons, avoiding intersection takeoffs helps us reduce our noise signature. Using the full length of a runway allows us to gain the maximum amount of altitude before we cross the airport boundary and fly over nearby homes. Using the best angle of climb speed will net us the greatest altitude gain for the distance traveled. If this makes you uncomfortable, stick with the best rate of climb speed for your climb out. We'll retract our landing gear as soon as we have established a positive rate of climb and can no longer land on the remaining runway. That reduces drag, which again allows us to leave the airport environment with the greatest altitude gain. As we approach the airport boundary, and certainly before we fly over any residential areas, we'll reduce power to the cruise climb power setting. This will slow the prop as much as safely possible. Your pilot's operating handbook or airplane flight manual will provide you with acceptable cruise climb power settings. You may be surprised at how slowly you can safely turn that propeller. Many pilots don't realize that operating over square, that is, at a higher manifold pressure than prop RPM, is perfectly permissible in most airplanes. And remember also to make your power reduction as smoothly as possible to reduce those abrupt attention-getting sounds. Let's apply these suggestions to an average A36 Bonanza and see the difference in noise created at the departure end of the runway. First, a typical high-power, low-rate of climb departure. Now let's compare that to a best rate of climb departure with a power reduction to the cruise climb setting. As you can see, this simple change in procedure yielded a 5 dB reduction in noise at the airport boundary. The route we choose for our departure is very important. Our first choice would be any noise abatement procedure established for the runway we're using. Where none are published, I often ask the FBO or airport management about the best departure plan. At controlled airports, ATC instructions override noise abatement procedures. But I've usually found that traffic and weather permitting, controllers will allow me to use departure routes that help me avoid noise-sensitive neighborhoods. If no noise abatement procedures have been established, we'll rely on common sense to choose a departure path. We'll try to climb out over industrial areas or interstate highways where will be the quietest activity around. Airports hemmed in by development pose a special challenge. Sometimes the best you can do is just head for the least populated areas, at the highest possible altitude, of course. Flight instructors are particularly important in the effort to reduce perceived aircraft noise. Repetitive activities like touch and goes and practice instrument approaches are best performed at rural airports wherever possible. Simulated engine failures should not be done in areas where the roar of the engine coming back to life will be particularly annoying to people on the ground. Ground reference maneuvers such as turns around a point should be practiced in the least densely populated areas available to you. Arriving at our destination, it's again important for us to know and use any established noise abatement procedure. Beyond that, remember the basic guidelines. Stay as high as possible. Keep the prop as slow as possible. And fly patterns as close to the runway as possible. Some pilots fly an unnecessarily wide, long pattern. This not only takes them out over residential areas at relatively low altitude, it doesn't leave many options in the event of a power loss. Whenever possible, maintain pattern altitude until turning onto the base leg. This is particularly beneficial from the noise standpoint when you have to extend the downwind leg for any reason. Some pilots also allow themselves to get too low, too far out. Then they have to drag the airplane up to the runway with power. The folks living underneath this experiment in pitch and power probably won't appreciate the demonstration. Remember that flaps are used to slow down and go down. It just doesn't make sense to get any draggier than necessary in the pattern and then have to add power to reach the runway. Clean, stable, low power, low drag approaches are significantly quieter approaches. On final, stay at or above the VASI, and don't advance the propeller control until you've made your final power reduction. Night operations, so vital to this nation's health and well-being, have already been curtailed at many airports. Airplanes aren't really louder at night, but it sure seems like they are because the rest of the community is quieter. Planning our operations for daylight hours whenever possible is a good way to reduce noise when it would be most bothersome. And working with airport management to establish a preferred runway and other procedures for night operations can help reduce the impact of night flights on the local community. Using the minimum power necessary and achieving the highest altitude possible under the circumstances.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, finished up Saturday afternoon. Continuing to see a good progression here to the west and southwest with those offshore winds, northeasterly winds, anywhere from 10 to 15 miles a day, expanding southwestward. And that's going to continue but lessen as the winds diminish. It looks like the cold north to northeast winds will continue probably through Tuesday night and then start to become a little more easterly on Wednesday. So you'll see continued ice expansion out here along the edge, but not as fast as it's gone the last couple of days. Moving on to the marine forecast here, north winds 60 knots for Lynn Canal tomorrow. Definitely high-end storm warnings there with 12-foot seas, 40 gusts 55 Stevens Passage right out of the north, and then southeast 35 with gusts, higher gusts there for Clarence Strait. South coast east 45 knots, just shy of a storm warning all the way up, and then good gales there, northeast 40 on the far north coast. And for Monday, still some 30 to 35 knot winds here along the north coast out of the east, 15-foot seas. Southeast 25, 17 to 19-foot seas. Southeast 25 for Clarence Strait. Winds still north, but coming down a little bit there for Stevens Passage. Still pretty brisk northerly wind at 30 knots, and winds coming down to 40 knots for northern Lynn Canal with 8-foot seas. And for the Cook Inlet area, northeast 15, pick up to 25 knots south of the Forelands with small craft advisory down across Kachemak Bay. Northeasterly small crafts here for the Barren Islands, western North Gulf Coast, turning north there in Prince William Sound, higher gusts out of the northern bays, and northeast 25 for the eastern North Gulf Coast. And for the next day, on Monday, northeast winds here for the coast, 25 knots, 13-foot seas, north 25, 12-foot seas for the Barren Islands, north 25 for Prince William Sound, and 40-knot winds here. Southern Cook Inlet out of the northeast, north 40 for Kachemak Bay, northern Cook Inlet seeing a pretty good jump in the winds up to 30 knots. And for Bristol Bay, northeast 20 all the way down to Cape Saracheff to Sitkinak, small craft advisories, north winds 25 to 30 knots, so at 12-foot seas. Kodiak Island, northeast 30 on the east side, Chillicothe Strait out of the north. And northerlies at 30 here for all the zones there around Kodiak. For Chillicothe Strait and the east side, and southwest, or from Sitkinak to Cape Saracheff, those small craft advisories continue, 25 to 30 knot winds. Small craft advisories here on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula all the way up into Bristol Bay. And for the Aleutians, Fox Islands tomorrow, northeast 20, seas 8 to 9 feet, and winds easterly 20 to 25, and that's about as high as they'll be. Maybe 25 knots there south of the islands, and then increasing as you head west, 40 knots. Gales back in the picture here, way out over the far western Aleutians, or staying in the picture. And then for Monday, those fall down below gale force. These 30 small craft advisories here, back to almost ADAC, and probably including ADAC with those sea heights up to 10 feet. Otherwise, 15 to 20 knots toward Nikolsky, and then Unalaska Island northerlies at 25. And for the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, northerlies at 25 turn northeast there for the Pribilofs. North of the island, north 20. And those turn east 20 for St. Matthew Island. Light winds under the high center there for St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. Then on Monday, high pressure retreating back, so more of a north-northwest breeze at 15 up there. 20 to as high as 30 knots out of the north, south of Nunivak Island. Small craft advisories for the Pribilofs and north 20 for St. Matthew Island. Up along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, tomorrow winds mostly out of the east and then turning south there as you get over toward Demarcation Point, all at 20 knots. Brisk wind advisories here for the central coast, beginning at the central coast at 25, increasing southwest 30, west side, all the way down to Cape Thompson, then abruptly dropping back to 15 knots from Cape Thompson down toward Wales. And the outlook for Monday, light winds here, west-northwest, almost a variable wind pattern here from Cape Beaufort to the Bering Strait, 10 knots, light 15 from the north, turn northwest at 15 for the central coast, and then westerlies 15 to 20 there for the eastern stretch of the Beaufort Sea. And then for the forecast for tonight, strong high pressure holds here over St. Lawrence Island through the interior into the Northwest Territories. Front coming along the top there in that westerly flow will bring snow, increasing chance of snow, maybe some blowing snow to the western Arctic coast. Otherwise, no change really anywhere in the state with increasing winds, high wind warning out for the Juneau area tomorrow for Taku winds increasing to 70 knots. And again, those storm warnings there for northern Lynn Canal. Precipitation coming northward here and be kind of a wintry mix here depending on which side of this front you're on for Monday. But it looks like staying mostly dry up like the Klondike Highway, North Gulf Coast, clear and cold in the interior, chance of snow on the Arctic coast and North Slope. Bering Sea, not much change at all. And thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.